I'm Dr. Schafer. I have been working in the field of psychology most of my life. My professional title is psychologist, clinical psychologist, and neuropsychologist. In fact, we're here in the town called Woodland, California, which is about 11 miles from the place I graduated. I graduated from University of California, Davis, where I got my master's, and then I went on to get my graduate degree, a PhD, and some neuropsychology work in Rosebridge Graduate School of Integrative Psychology, which is where I learned my holistic approach to psychology and the practice thereof. I also worked here in the Woodland Hospital, actually, some years ago, and I went on to get a neuropsychology certificate from University of California, Berkeley. That was my postgraduate work. As a professor, I was teaching college students. Before that, I was teaching the young ones, second graders, reading specialist, learning disability specialist, etc. I didn't plan to be a psychologist until I was a teacher in Davis, California. My mom was a second grade teacher, so teaching comes naturally for our family. I think the little ones were so wonderful because they're so honest with their world, the world that is around them. It was so fun and so easy to teach kids that want to learn. So my work with children also included parent-teacher conferences, and I worked with parents. I saw that some of the same problems that were in children were in adults. I was very interested in Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist in the 1900s, early 1900s, and he also studied with Dr. Roberto Assagioli, who was his colleague. They both liked the whole idea of archetypes and subpersonalities that are actually born out of unmet childhood needs, and that's what I got interested in. That was the most interesting thing, that tough things that happen to everybody when they're young. I just got more and more interested as time went on, and I thought, boy, I got to study the brain. I started with people like Dr. Amen, he's done 100,000 brain scans, PET scans on brains, so he knows a lot about the brain. I started following people like that. I started learning about neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, and that led to me getting a PhD and working in places like the University of California Medical Center over in Sacramento as a budding psychologist and neuropsychologist. I also worked with the Sacramento County Mental Health Treatment Center, which is all the acute cases, one of everything and two of some things. I was able to get a lot of good diagnostic skills there. That led to my being mentored by quite a few people that were much smarter than me and much better mentors. I did a column when I was at Sacramento City College, and this led to one of my books called Ask Dr. Ann. And Ask Dr. Ann is about basic skills and learning. So I wrote a column for the National Literacy Coalition, and it became a book. I was able to write about things that were very commonly a problem for my students. That would be attention deficit disorder, for example. So I wrote this column because I got a lot of questions, and these were the answers to questions from my international readership. I got asked to help learn more about psychosynthesis, which was the conference, the world conference that I attended, and helped my mentor, Dr. Edith Schafer, who actually studied in Italy with Dr. Assagioli. So all the people that were in that conference are written up in this book. So I had that to help me focus on how widespread psychosynthesis was. Because psychosynthesis doesn't sort of resonate for people, and it's a hard word to remember and a hard word to understand, I said, I need to translate that into real people talk. So I called it soul growth. And this is my book now that I'm working on about Roberto Assagioli's work. Soul growth is the growth of your whole being, your mental, your emotional, your body functions, and the spiritual aspect, which is left out of a lot of psychological practices. Soul growth, which is psychosynthesis, is your ticket to exploring inner space. And that's what I talk about. In this particular book, I sort of mapped out how it is we learn about our own soul. Now, what's soul? People ask that all the time. What is soul growth? Well, what's your soul? It's your own essence, your own self, the biggest, highest part of you, and of course, sometimes the lower parts of you. But growing yourself, even Socrates, way back in ancient history, said the most important thing is to know thyself. My specialty is treating the whole person and addressing all these issues that are happening in the post-COVID world. COVID has changed the world, and not in such a great way. Some great ways and some not so great ways. We hardly have to go out of the house if we choose not to, but that's not healthy. I'm for good mental health, good emotional health, good body health, and good spiritual health. Now, that's why my book is named Soul Growth Solutions. People need each other. I have decided that the rest of my life is devoted to teaching people about self-growth in a group environment that can be on Zoom. I've learned to use it, and it's wonderful. What I want to do is have our soul growth solutions, our nonprofit, support things like helping the teen suicide and the single parent problems. That would be, to me, the best legacy I could give to the world, is to share Assagioli's wisdom and Carl Jung's wisdom, because that's where I found the most fruitful and practical evidence of people growing. Everybody has something to contribute, and finding out who you are and what you're good at and what you're not so good at. Very important. How are you going to soothe your own soul? What is your tribe? Who supports you? Who doesn't support you? Make adjustments and transform yourself if you need to. That's really important. This is a transformational program. This is about first addressing yourself and then addressing those around you. This is what Roberto Assagioli taught us. We have what he called subpersonalities that are born out of unmet childhood needs. So let's just think of the most common one of those subpersonalities, and I'll name it, the critic. Everybody has a critic. That is a subpersonality that came out of your parents or your teachers or your workplace criticizing. What happens in soul growth is you get a set of learnings that help you turn your critic into a best coach for you, so you can get some mileage out of those awkward and toxic situations in your past. It's okay to have critiquing. It is not okay to be criticized in a way that destroys your inner soul. It's not okay. So soul growth teaches you how to handle that. Learn what triggers you. We're not asking you to not be who you are. We're asking the person to consider transforming and accessing what's good about what may seemingly seem bad. That's why they call me a stretch and not a shrink. I'm known as a stretch in the field, not a shrink. When we ask people what were the adverse childhood experiences, particularly those people who have gone to prison, when we ask them to identify what adverse childhood experiences they've had, we find that we can correlate that with their mental health. And this has been proven in the more advanced prison populations where they're doing good research, feeding them the right food, having programs that pay attention to the abuse they had as children. I think we have to change that. So that probably has influenced me quite a lot in my research and my teaching and the writing that I'm doing now. I hope I don't bore people with research, but it's the most exciting time for actual research and actual solutions that we've ever had. So yes, depression is rising to 50%, 57% of the population is depressed or anxious. We need to do something about that. Good news, there's a lot we can do. We can do it with diet, we can do it with, and not exercise, but just plain old walk and talk with people, our friends. People don't think they have friends. Well, make a list of your friends. Here's a nice thing I learned on one of the podcasts I watched recently. One of the researchers said he decided to write a letter to people that had made a difference in his life. And I'm going to do this. Write a letter telling them something that was special that they did in your life. He said he couldn't believe what a difference that made in his life. So do something for someone else. Think how it might affect them and you. Turns out the person that does the giving usually gets more than the person that gets. So those are things that are important to me, and this is my lifetime work. This is everything I've ever learned and will continue to learn that I want to teach other people. But my mentor, Dr. Edith Schafer, said to me, you know, you have a pretty strong teacher subpersonality. So I want you to remember something going forward. You must always remember your student has to want to learn. And sometimes I forget that. Yes, Dr. Schafer was quite the mentor. And also Molly Brown, she lives in Shasta, and she wrote a book called Growing Whole. That's another good Asajoli book. There's so many good things that we examine in our coursework, our book, and also our online course. So when we have a fundraiser, whether it's going to be with somebody like Rotary or I'd like it to be a big event where we have people come and break bread together and talk about all the good things that we have in life, because we really have more good than we have bad if you really take a close look. So I'm happy to have this legacy award, because I do feel like I'm leaving a legacy in Soul Growth Solutions. I was privileged to do a testing on a young man who was getting ready to transfer to UC Berkeley, California from Sacramento City College. I tested him, I verified there was a learning disability, and I listed the accommodations he would need when he was in school at the University of California in Berkeley. So one of those accommodations that I listed is that he needed to be able to use a calculator. That used to be the biggest accommodation we would have to make for people that had a math disability. Now, nobody doesn't get a calculator. What was an accommodation in the old days is now just commonplace. But at that time, the math professor said, nope, he wasn't going to do that accommodation. Not in his class. People had to do it without calculators. It wasn't fair. Well, we said, we made the case as best we could. This is fair. It's not fair not to give it to him, because he can do the math. He just needs to accommodate for the extra time it takes for him to get to the solutions, he needed the calculator. Well, all the way up through the president of the university, the provost, the board of trustees, all of that, they all said, no, you have to do this because the Americans with Disability is the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act is the law now. And he said, well, I have academic freedom. And I can decide what happens in my classroom. And the president of the college had to break it to him that no, he didn't have that kind of academic freedom. So he went all the way through the faculty union and every place he could go with that fight, and he lost. And I suppose he probably ended up supporting this kid's education somewhere. It seemed like it was probably pretty costly to him to hang on to that old-fashioned idea of not in my class. So I feel like that was very noteworthy, very historic, and being part of the Americans with Disabilities Act in its early days just was very rewarding. And I think a lot of kids that wouldn't have been able to make it through college made it because they had a disability and it needed accommodations, and they could do the work as long as they had those accommodations. So this is almost to go to press. I think we're going to make it to press. The Soul Growth Solutions is going to, and the online class. You can find information about this and when it's going to be published if you go to AskDrAnn.com, and that's AskDoctorAnn. So spell out the doctor part, AskDrAnn.com, and you will find, you'll be able to order this book, which is lots of tips on people with, especially people that have a hard time learning. There's a lot of tips and tricks in this about basic skills and learning in college, especially in a college setting. There are 27 articles about 8 timeless topics, and I'm glad that this was endorsed by my lovely faculty members that I had the pleasure of being with at City College. So all the coming sign-ups for online classes are going to be online again at AskDrAnn.com. You can buy this book. You can eventually buy Soul Growth when we have both the books and the online classes. We will be giving some free classes as well. We'll give some introductory classes that will be free so you can kind of find out what it's all about. And we're looking forward to having that available probably by summer of '24. That's our goal. And we'll be doing a lot of fundraisers between now and then.